Hello, welcome to the Sound of Science, the place where we deconstruct unscientific bogus and silly scams. Let's go get them. Hello, you wonderful critical thinkers. Today we're going to assess another video of the man also known as the world's highest IQ fraud. Yes, this man is a fraud. He claims to have a 276 IQ, which is both statistically and biologically impossible. Furthermore, this guy is council member, committee member, vice president, and even founder of about every organization that recognizes his fake IQ. So that recognition is meaningless. On top of that, he bought himself a fake doctor's degree in order to fake being smart. But maybe, most importantly, nothing that this guy says is consistent with being intelligent. He mostly reads his shallow messages from screens or pieces of paper and is hardly able to pronounce his own text, strongly indicating that someone else wrote it for him. In one of his recent videos, he now says that science explains why Jesus is alive, which of course is bogus. Let's have a look.
Hello, my name is YoungHoon Kim, the world's highest IQ record holder.
No, you are a fake. The only record you hold is the highest fake IQ in the world. I challenge you to do a real and independent IQ test under scientifically controlled conditions. But before anyone should waste any time on that, maybe at least say or do something that looks intelligent instead of all the silly things you've been doing so far.
Here is the scientific explanation for why Jesus is alive.
Wait, that's a rather curious way of phrasing. The scientific explanation for why Jesus is alive. Before you can show us a scientific explanation for that, you first need to demonstrate that Jesus is alive in the first place. So please first show us that Jesus is alive. And then of course we can express our amazement, because how can a man be still alive after 2000 years? And that is the moment that we need a scientific explanation for it. Do you understand that? If you don't first scientifically prove that he is alive, a scientific explanation for that is irrelevant. Somehow I think this kind of basic reasoning will go over the head of this highest IQ fraud. But let's see what more nonsense you will bring about.
Saying Jesus is alive may sound like a religious statement, but it is also supported by scientific reasoning based on historical methodology, eyewitness analysis, and probability theory.
So, those are just a bunch of empty Jesus claims. You haven't shown us any evidence yet, but please continue.
First, science relies on the principle of inference to the best explanation.
Yes and no. Inference is only part of the scientific toolkit. Inference is a process to interpret evidence, but inference in itself is not evidence, and strictly relying on inference usually happens in a very weak case, where there is no empirical evidence available. For example, if we're talking about an event that supposedly took place centuries ago, and we have no empirical data that was collected during that event. In that case, we might be forced to strictly rely on inference to come to our conclusions, but then our conclusions most likely will be highly uncertain. But we're not talking about an event in the past, are we? We're talking about now, because your claim is that your Jesus is alive now. And if that is your claim, then please present your empirical evidence. Spoiler, you won't. You have no case whatsoever for your Jesus being alive.
We observe data and ask, what hypothesis best explains all the facts? Here are the key facts nearly all scholars agree on, including secular historians. Jesus was crucified and died. His tomb was found empty.
No, that's not true, and you know that. Although most biblical scholars agree that Jesus of Nazareth actually existed and was crucified by the Romans, there is actually a lot of debate going on about the idea of his tomb being found empty. Scholars like Bart Ehrman, Gerd Ludemann, or John Dominic Crossan, they are pretty skeptic about this, so no, that is not entirely true.
Many people claim to see him alive afterward, individually and in groups.
No, this is where you're completely wrong. There are stories about people seeing Jesus after he died, and most of these stories don't even claim to be eyewitness accounts themselves. They are stories about people who talk about other people who claim to have seen Jesus. The only biblical author who claimed that he himself saw Jesus after he died was the Apostle Paul, and he only wrote that down 25 years after Jesus died. So it looks as if it wasn't really important to Paul. John, Matthew, and Peter also supposedly saw Jesus after he died, but they were not the original authors of the Gospels that were named after them. So again, those are stories of people who talk about other people who claim to have seen Jesus after he died. The idea that 500 people saw Jesus after he died is based upon a claim made by Paul, but there is no testimony of any of those 500 people themselves. So the supposed evidence that Jesus was alive after his crucifixion is mostly stories written by people who tell about other people who claimed something. So that is pretty meaningless. You got to come up with something better if you want to defend the position that your Jesus is alive. And if you have such a high IQ, that should be easy for you.
His disciples were radically transformed and willing to die for their belief in his resurrection.
No, you don't know if the supposed disciples were willing to radically change their lives for Jesus. All you know is that there are stories from people who talk about other characters who supposedly showed that behavior. The whole problem with your line of reasoning seems to be that you don't understand what an eyewitness account is. So, let me explain. First, some event takes place. Then people witness that event, and then they tell you about it. That's an eyewitness account. So in order for a random story to be an eyewitness account, you first must prove that the event took place. Otherwise, the story is not an eyewitness account but just a story. This is where you Christians usually start whining, making it even worse. Well, Christians then say, the stories in the Bible is all we have. How else are we supposed to prove something is true? And that is one of the most stupid rebuttals you can imagine. If stories in an old book are all you have to prove that your Jesus is alive, then you can't prove that your Jesus is alive and you shouldn't even try it. If those stories are all you have, there is no good reason to believe in your Jesus in the first place. What Christians then usually do is compare the stories in the Bible with court cases in which eyewitness accounts are accepted as evidence. Yes, you idiots, eyewitness accounts are accepted as evidence in court cases. But not when the witness claims that some guy has risen from the dead. Then his eyewitness account will be immediately dismissed as a delusion or a lie. You know why? Because in the entire history of mankind, there has not been one single well-documented, peer-reviewed, scientifically proven case of someone being resurrected from the dead. On top of that, no one ever in the history of mankind has demonstrated that something like that could be possible in the first place. If even all of that is not clear enough for your fake high IQ, then listen to this. I do not believe your claim about supposed eyewitnesses who saw your Jesus, for the exact same reason why you do not accept the supposed eyewitness accounts of people who saw the Hindu god Vishnu or the Egyptian god Osiris. I guess you don't accept those stories as valid eyewitness accounts, or do you? And of course there is more. You do realize that even if for some magic reason it was proven that the Jesus character resurrected from the dead 2000 years ago, how does that prove in any way that he is alive today? All of these objections against your Jesus claims have been explained on YouTube 1,000 times. I can't imagine that someone with at least average intelligence would not know about that. So the least thing you should do if you really were to be intelligent was anticipating on these rebuttals, because if you are so smart, you should have seen my arguments coming from miles away. Yet you don't see them coming, and instead you stick to the very bottom of hollow, mindless, unsupported nonsense claims from the standard toolkit of budget Christian apologist rhetoric. So how does it show again that you are a smart guy?
We apply scientific reasoning here. Which explanation best fits this data?
Sure, the best explanation for your data. Well, no explanation because you have no data. And if you were to interpret your stories about your Jesus as data, then the explanation is simple. The stories are not true. The authors lied. They made up the stories. What do you think is more likely, people lying or people coming back from the dead?
Mass hallucination. Neurologically impossible across groups.
Well, we don't need mass hallucination as an explanation. How about mass suggestibility or mass hysteria or collective delusion? History is paved with examples of large groups of people claiming that they saw the sun dancing or they witnessed flying vampires. Do you accept those claims as well? I guess not.
Stolen body doesn't explain post-death appearances or disciple transformation.
Wait, what? Apart from the fact that we don't need to explain a post-death appearance of Jesus and the transformation of the disciples because we don't know if these things actually happened because we don't have facts, all we have is stories. So there's no need to explain anything, but let's take one step back here and listen to what you're saying. You're now trying to prove that Jesus lived after he died by saying that his body wasn't stolen, for else he couldn't have lived after he died. You do understand that this is a completely idiotic circular way of reasoning that only a complete fool would seriously try to pull off.
In other words, if we treat this event like any historical phenomenon.
But the whole point is that you cannot treat this as any other historical phenomenon. You first need to prove that this is a historical phenomenon, and you didn't do anything like that.
And apply scientific logic. The resurrection emerges as the most probable explanation. Therefore, the statement, Jesus is alive, is not just a theological. It is the best scientific conclusion based on historical and empirical evidence. Thank you.
No, there is zero empirical evidence for your Jesus, and you didn't even attempt to produce anything like it. Mr. Fake IQ, in your video you've demonstrated that you understand nothing about science. Science works through peer-reviewed publications in which data, hypotheses and theories are presented. You did nothing like that, and even did not mention one single scientific publication to support your claims. Therefore, we can safely dismiss your Jesus claims, and they are in no way supported by any science. Furthermore, your level of reasoning is at the very low bottom of budget Christian apologists. I even wonder if that low level of reasoning is your own, because you seem to be uncomfortably reading text from a piece of paper or a screen, and that raises the question if you even wrote the poorly composed text yourself. With this video, you rather demonstrate yourself to be more of a fool than a highly intelligent individual. So no, I don't believe your IQ claim. I highly suspect you to be a fake. So my challenge to you is to make a video in which you do or say things that are demonstrably intelligent. For a change. Thanks for watching.